made a special trip to Fred's hometown to score an exclusive interview with the man that has the entire nation on edge. Thanks for taking some time to sit down with us.
Not a problem.
Rural Kentucky,
Northern Kentucky, yeah.
Northern Kentucky.
Yeah.
It's a hill country here. It's very beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
Your most recent work was on WKRC TV.
Well, yes, of course. The Manhattan Project. First, I'll tell you what it is. The atomic bombs were a result of the Manhattan Project, which began on September 1st of 1939. Scientists like Albert Einstein and Enrico Fermi were in charge of this. Enrico Fermi being my dad is how I know about this. But Einstein and Fermi only wanted to create this bomb under one condition, that the president be notified of the dangers of atomic technology. At first, research was done at a few universities until Fermi, my dad, led a group of physicists to conduct the first controlled nuclear reaction, which took place under Stagg Field at the University of Chicago. After this, lots of funding started being pushed towards the atomic bombs being made. 120,000 Americans my dad was in charge of at this time for the Manhattan Project. But only a small group of scientists knew that this bomb was actually going to be developed, because it'd be very hard to keep 120,000 people quiet about it. When they finally dropped these bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima in Japan, 166,000 people died in Hiroshima and 246,000 people died in Nagasaki. That's a lot of people. My dad felt so bad about it for the longest time. I mean, look at that. That's what it looked like when the bomb went off. That's just terrible. It's still going. Then about 20 years later, the Civil Rights Movement started. That was kind of about black Americans getting their right to vote and the desegregation of schools and public places. They didn't like that. And as a white person that didn't mind blacks, I didn't like it either. So I always really kept a good watch on what was going on in that thing. So the Civil Rights Movement, as I said before, is the desegregation of whites and blacks, and for blacks to gain more legal rights. The unofficial leader of this movement was Martin Luther King Jr. And his big thing was to have a nonviolent protest, where he would organize sit-ins where they'd sit in a restaurant until they were served, or they did the Montgomery bus boycott, which was sparked by Rosa Parks sitting in the front of a bus and refusing to give her seat up to a white man, and eventually getting arrested for it. That was on December 1st of 1955, and we boycotted for a little over a year, and it ended in December 20th of 1956, when a Supreme Court ruling said that the segregation of buses was unconstitutional and it was not going to be all right anymore. Then, on May 4th of 1961, a bus full of blacks left Washington, D.C. as a protest, and they called it the Freedom Ride. The plan was to go to different cities and then eventually make it down to New Orleans on May 17th. But when they went through Birmingham, there was a riot that broke out, and the bus was stoned, the tires were slashed, and the bus got firebombed. The police did nothing about it because it was the South and they didn't see anything bad about the blacks getting hurt. I was very upset by this personally. I didn't like it at all. The Freedom Ride never made it to New Orleans because the bus company, in fear of losing more buses and drivers, canceled their ride. But the Freedom Ride did gain national attention. And after all these events, segregation became illegal and it was done. But just because there was legal equality, that didn't guarantee economic equality and social acceptance for the blacks at this time. And you know, that Martin Luther King Jr. really paid the ultimate price. Someone shot him because of his beliefs. That's just sad. Here's a clip that I found of people getting sprayed with fire hoses because of what they believed in by our government. Here comes in the fire truck. They're unloading it. Look, those people are getting just doused. See, that guy got knocked over. That's terrible. They're doing this to our own Americans. Look how bad that is. Then when that Vietnam War started, I jumped right in and I wanted to be part of the combat. I actually got to be a pilot, and I was actually one of the guys that laid down the napalm strikes along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. There's actually some footage of it. It's pretty cool. Look at this. See those cartridges fall? And that's all the napalm that goes everywhere. This is what it looked like, and this is what I dropped. Just everywhere. That completely annihilated those jungles in the cities. See, they're coming dozing down and boom! That was a pretty cool thing right there. But man, let me tell you, in that Vietnam War, we really peppered the hell out of that Ho Chi Minh Trail. It was called Operation Rolling Thunder, and I was one of the first pilots out there. That was awesome. We also dropped Agent Orange, which was a toxin that killed all the trees in the jungle, and it actually ended up killing people also, which we didn't expect to happen. Eventually, towards the end of that war, a ceasefire was reached in 1973, and the rest of the remaining troops were withdrawn. That's when I left. Soon after that, the North Vietnamese attacked the South in April of 1975, and the North Vietnamese captured Saigon, and the United States was officially out of Vietnam. But every single one of our political objectives for this region met with failure. And the Vietnam War is seen as a failure on the United States' part. But oh man, let me tell you, on July 16th of 1969, when the rocket called the Saturn V launched into space from the Kennedy Space Center, they had Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Edward Buzz Aldrin in it. They said they're going to the moon. I didn't believe it at all. Until they started having newscasts and broadcasts of everything that was going on. That was the coolest thing ever, I thought. They actually put humans on the moon. I'd never believed that happened, and there was a lot of controversy that went around with it. They were there for 8 days total, and when they returned, they landed in the sea, and they were put in quarantine for 21 days to make sure that no new viruses came with them that may have been on the moon. That was pretty crazy stuff. Here's a video of Neil Armstrong's famous words.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Then when I was a little older, I decided to join the NOAA and help clean up natural disasters, or maybe oil spills, like what happened in 1989 when the Exxon Valdez lost 11.2 million gallons of crude oil into the waters of Prince William Sound. And this spill is still being cleaned up today by those guys in the NOAA. I'm not doing it anymore, but man, that was bad. I've got some footage there for you of part of the oil spill. You'll see that in just a second. So here's the beach and coastline of the oil spill. If you see this guy who'll scrape this rock, that's all sludge from this crude oil. And then this is the coastline, and all these ships are lined up to help try and clean up the oil. There it is again. You can see the drains being pulled out, and this is the Alaska where it happened, and this is kind of explaining the wildlife. But man, I tell you, I've had a cool life, and I can't wait to see what happens next. You guys have a good day. I'll see you soon.